Hello, Ryan. How's it going? Good. I enjoyed your video, Lucky Girl Syndrome. Well, before I get into that, though, first, today, I'm a day late. May the 4th be with you, I guess. Yeah. I just got done. Friday was my 20th day working straight. And some of those days were 14-hour days, but at the very minimum, 8-hour days, 8 to 9-hour days, some 10. One was an overnight shift. One was an 8 to 4 and an overnight shift. It was bad. Anyway, I'm here. Still living the dream. So, yeah. That's why I'm kind of late with this video. Also, I finished Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson. So I'm waiting for the next book in the series. It'll be a while before I can purchase that one, but maybe I can get it from the library, and then we'll go from there. Yeah. I've decided to read Templars by Dan Jones, The Rise and Spectacular Fall of God's Holy Warriors. So maybe I'll learn sometime. So yeah, that's cool. Alrighty, your video, Lucky Girl Syndrome. Man, those lyrics are just full of all sorts of nuggets, and you hit a lot of it right on the head. Where like social media is like giving us the attention that we still want when we were toddlers or something like that. And it's not healthy. So we just find new ways to get more attention, influencer status, right? But, and I deal with this a lot in my line of work with these boys who are just extremely entitled with every little thing. Their sense of entitlement is just it reaches ridiculous levels. And I try to talk to them about this, and I'm like, guys, everything in life, like, okay, in the course of your life, the only thing that you get is basic food, water to drink, and air to breathe. Everything beyond that is a blessing. And in 21st century modern day America, we have it easy where we're expected to only work 40 hours a week. We get to have this device in our pockets that allows us to communicate with people across the globe in an instant. We can travel more easily than anyone in the history of mankind. And it is incredible, the things that we can accomplish in our lives. Like, look at all these books. Not only do I have more books than a lot of people did for the majority of history, but also I am effectively a peasant, but I can read. And like, that is a blessing in itself. So I'm thinking of this Lucky Girl Syndrome, the lyrics. And I'm like, man, if you are alive today, you really do have it lucky compared to the rest of the world. And if you read some history, you realize that the history that we know are the people who had it just about as easy as we did because of their position. But everybody else that lived at the time, they had it way more rough. Hot water, a hot bath. Man, it is incredible what we live with. It really is. So, just a little reminder that entitlement is not everything that it used to be. Okay. I'm going to share a story, and not a story that I know too well, and not a story of a person, but a story of an object. This is the story of the Shroud of Turin. Now, before I tell you about the history of the Shroud of Turin, I'm going to tell you what the Shroud of Turin is for those maybe you don't know or people listening don't know. The Shroud of Turin is a piece of cloth that is currently held in Turin, I think at a museum, and it's technically owned by the Vatican City. But this piece of cloth is significant because it bears the image of what appears to be a crucified man. Now, the image itself is pretty faint. If you can just do a Google search and look it up, okay? The image itself is pretty faint, but if you look closely throughout, it's like tan, but it has like what looks like splotches on it of a man who's about 5 feet, 11 inches tall. And, the details on it are kind of hard to make out, but you can see it's a whole image, okay? An entire body. Right here, on the head is actually, the image has to be reversed. So this photographer in like the late 1800s, I believe it was, took a negative image of the Shroud of Turin. And what that's revealed was significantly more details about the image that's on the cloth. And amazingly, there is a crown of thorns on this in this image. Now, that's all pretty cool. The cloth itself has been tracked to about 1353, 1390, depending on how you look at it. Since then, we know that this exact piece of cloth, we have the history of that piece of cloth. But the amazing thing is that modern science cannot explain the differences in the colors of the pattern, the differences of color on the cloth. It's not residue, it's not oil, it's not paint, it is not burned. They cannot, using scientific methods of today's day and age, they cannot figure out what made this image. It's absolutely incredible. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the history, okay? So the known history kind of starts in 1390 when Bishop Pierre d'Arcis wrote a memorandum. Basically, he sent this, if I remember right, he sent this to the Pope and said, this shroud that's on display in my city of Lire, France, is a forgery. It's not real. I know the artist, is what he says. Now, it's likely that he's referencing a shroud known to bear an image of a crucified man that was on display and in the possession of Geoffrey de Charny from Lire, France. And he was known to be in possession of it from 1353 to 1357. Now, to go back a little bit farther, there were reports of the Byzantine emperors in Constantinople who had a shroud that apparently held the image of Christ. That shroud disappeared during the sack of Constantinople in 1204. We don't know if those two shrouds are the same, but this one appeared in France 150 years later. In 1453, Margaret de Charny deeded the shroud to the House of Savoy. Later, it suffered damage from a fire, and a drop of molten silver produced a symmetrically placed mark through the layers of the cloth. It had been folded in a way, and then that molten silver dropped in a way that it melted through it, and then it left this tiny hole symmetrically through the entire cloth. Several repair jobs have been attempted throughout the centuries. The shroud was then taken to Turin in 1578, where it has remained ever since. Now, there have been, as I said before, there have been many, many studies on this piece of cloth, and there's a lot of evidence that the studies done were not done properly. For example, they tested very, very carefully. They tested the pollen from the shroud and determined that the pollen that came from the fibers of the cloth itself would have come about someplace in Western Europe. And it would have dated to, 1500 or well, I can't remember the exact year. So they tested this, did that pollen testing, and they're like, well, this proves it. It's a medieval forgery. However, critics of that specific test say the location of the pollen for that test was taken from patchwork, not the original shroud. So it needs more testing done. Now, I did read somewhere, but I think it was unconfirmed, that they did do another pollen test from the shroud itself, and that dated to the Middle East around the time that Jesus would have been alive. I only found one person saying that, though, so I don't know if that's true or not. I don't think so, but it could be. Regardless, there was another piece of cool history that I think might have been the Shroud of Turin from earlier, and that was known as the image of Edessa, and that was a shroud that was taken way earlier, but it was actually found in Constantinople, and it was basically, at one point there was a flood, and in the wall around the city, they found this this cloth in the wall that would have been above the floodwaters. How did it get there? Why? They don't know. But they took it out and looked at it, and they're saying that this piece of cloth bore the image of a crucified man. They did not, the records don't specify whether it's a full body image, just the head image, or what it was, and we have no idea where it went. That could have been the shroud that the Byzantine emperors held on to until 1204, when it was sacked by Western European crusaders, who would have then come back, and maybe one of the relics or souvenirs that one of these people took was this shroud, and then it later became the Shroud of Turin. That's very, very possible. So there's all this mystery, and I'm just going over I'm skimming the top, right? If you want to know more, I'll put a link in the description below about a guy, a Catholic bishop, friar, briar, I don't know his title, but he appeared on the Pints with Aquinas podcast, and he has been studying the shroud for like a decade, and this guy is super knowledgeable. I'll put a link in the description so you guys can watch him break all this down. It is incredible how much knowledge that man has. But what I want to say is that the image itself is anatomically perfect. He said that multiple times. Anatomically perfect, meaning that it is not in any way out of scale to the human body. It traces everything from the feet to the head. It has shoulders, arms, fingers, everything anatomically perfect in terms of scale. Okay? When you reverse the image, as I said earlier, you can see more details. This guy had longer hair, had a beard. But the most amazing thing is that there was hemoglobin found in the shroud, right where the man would have been pierced, where Jesus would have been pierced by a spear when he was hanging on the cross. Now, again, this all could have been, we've read the story, so we're going to make up this cloth. And then, hey, that's pretty cool artistry. But the question remains, how did the artist make it? Modern science cannot explain it. It's not paint, it's not oil, it's not residue, it's not sap, it's nothing known to mankind. The image on that cloth is unexplainable, which is absolutely incredible to say that it would be a medieval forgery. Even more remarkable, well, at least I think, is the idea that Jesus is the light of the world. And what could have created this image in my mind is an insane amount of like nuclear level light releasing energy, all at once that could resurrect the human body. So resurrection happens, boom. The shrouds that surround Jesus get imprinted immediately with whatever was between them, which was his body. And at that time it was crucified, but now resurrected. And that image is there, and by a process that has never been seen before and has not been repeated since. That could be an explanation. I'm not saying that's what it is, but I'm saying it's not out of God's hands. And I hope that they do some more testing on it. I hope that science continues to look into this thing. And I encourage you and everyone listening to do more research on the Shroud of Turin, because while it is not any sort of, mandated faith, you don't have to believe in the Shroud of Turin in order to have faith in Jesus. That's not a requirement of faith, right? However, in this day and age, our world is obsessed, and I mean obsessed, with physical evidence. And right when the world becomes obsessed with physical evidence, we look back to the Shroud of Turin and we can actually do tests on it. Physical evidence of a resurrection, right when the world is wondering, where's the physical evidence? One of the great debaters, atheist debaters, very, very popular online, is a guy by the name of Matt Dillahunty. One of his things is there's absolutely no physical evidence of the resurrection. What would physical evidence of the resurrection be? He has no idea. I'm just quoting his words, not mine. He doesn't know what evidence that would be, but there is no physical evidence. But maybe we're looking at it. Maybe it is in Turin. I don't know for sure, but I think that'd be pretty cool. All right, I got to go to bed. That's all I have for now. See you next time on Speeches and Stories, Lyrics and Letters. Bye.